This is the Tabernacle Podcast with John Vermillion and me, Britton Bishop. What's up, John?
It is a wonder we get anything done around this place.
110%. But we do.
We do. Oh, no, I'm not saying we're not working.
We do.
I'm saying Thursdays, podcast day. We're supposed to start at like 10 o'clock.
Yep.
According to my calendar.
Yes.
I've abridged it to 10:30. But when we get here at 10:30, what is it, afternoon? I'm starving, haven't had lunch yet.
I know. And then
there's just people around. We're having good conversations about ministry and stuff, but it's like, we got a podcast to do.
Yeah. Remember that one time Adam showed up afternoon and had a bag of not Chick-fil-A?
That was, I'm calling HR.
Yep. 100%.
The man walks in to the lobby.
And he goes, oh, I didn't get food.
Yeah, but he's got a Chick-fil-A bag. And a Big B coffee. Those don't even go together.
You know what could actually solve this problem is our, who's joining us today, Mr. Martin Rizzi. Don't introduce yourself. Just tell me what you're going to do about that.
Well, there's Martin. Yeah. I did not see you there.
Nothing, because the last time this situation happened, my office got tossed.
No, we didn't toss your office. Benji. No.
Yeah, his office deserved to be tossed.
Yes.
There was no Chick-fil-A that came home.
All right, this is something, it's kind of like a, whatever, culturally exciting thing that happened this week. I'm interested to get you guys' take on it. I don't know if you guys saw the unfortunate thing that unfolded in Monday Night Football.
I saw it the next morning.
Yeah, with the athlete that got hit, went into cardiac arrest, had to be treated, revived on the field, CPR and all that stuff. But then in the aftermath of that, we're seeing a bunch of stuff with prayers going out and all that. But I don't know if you guys saw the ESPN reporter.
I did.
I don't know. I thought
did
that was
because
cool.
you shared it, and then I was trying to figure out how to reshare it for the next half hour. That was amazing.
Cool. Yeah, well, I don't know. Like, what did you guys, whenever you're seeing that?
Why don't you explain, because not everybody's into football or ESPN.
Yeah, well, the athlete that played for the Buffalo Bills had a severe injury, had to CPR on the field, went into cardiac arrest, and so they actually canceled the game, which I thought was a really good move on the NFL's part. It's about more.
Players just walked off.
Yeah.
I mean, after a long delay of praying and both teams and everybody concerned.
Yeah. And young men's in the hospital being treated, stuff like that. And people, I mean, in times of tragedy like we do, we say, oh, pray for that family, best of wishes to that family,
thoughts
all
and prayers.
This stuff. I mean, it's blowing up on social media.
#thoughts and prayers.
Yeah, I would be surprised if anybody that's on here listening to this podcast that has social media hasn't seen something with it. But there was a cool moment. I was watching, just every morning I watch SportsCenter because I have a problem and I think it matters. Sorry, Joe. You probably don't listen to the podcast, but I'm working on it. But there's this moment where one of the guys, Dan, I don't know how to say his last name.
Orlovsky.
I just know he stepped out of the back of the end zone for a safety when he was a quarterback in the NFL. It's like the most embarrassing moment in sports history. But he's on there and he said, man, we're all saying all this stuff, prayers and best wishes. And then he proceeded to talk about, he's like, I don't even know if I'm allowed to do this, but I'm going to do something. And then immediately the other guy's like, do it. I'm like, cool. Because I don't think any of us heard that guy say that, which is exciting because he's got a bro there that's like, no, do it. This is what we should do. And he proceeds to, he's like, I'm going to bow my head. I'm going to close my eyes and I'm just going to pray right now. And he prays a prayer
ESPN.
On ESPN, on their show that's millions of people watch. I thought it was a cool moment.
And everybody followed suit. All three of them that were in the shot bowed their heads.
Closed their eyes.
It was one of the most amazing prayers that I think you could pray in that moment because he acknowledged who God was and like, no, we would do this because we believe prayer matters and it does something. Like he didn't shy away, but you could tell he was nervous.
Oh, yeah.
And that was what was hard for me. Like I got a buddy of mine that's not a believer and we were talking about it and he's like, it's sad that he had to be scared and nervous when he stepped into it, but I love the fact that he did it just despite.
Yeah. I don't know, what were your thoughts when you saw it?
Yeah, I was shocked. And I don't want to get into all the political reasons, but I mean, if you want to get canceled, I mean, cancel culture is funny as it is.
Right.
If you don't act like overwhelmingly concerned about this guy, because everyone rightfully is.
Right.
So you have to say thoughts and prayers, but don't do it.
Right.
You know, and then don't do it live. And, you know, I found myself Googling this guy. Who is this guy? Because I don't have the football historical knowledge that you do. Right. And then I was like, oh, yeah, I do remember that guy. But, you know, looking up on his
Carolina when he did it.
Or, yeah, might have, you know, long time ago. But he's an outspoken Christian.
Yeah.
And God put him in a place for such a time as that. And who knows what the ripple effect is. But in that moment did what no one else either had the courage to do or wasn't led to do.
Yeah.
But he was led to kind of take leadership for, dare I say, the NFL nation.
Yeah.
Because everyone heard about, man, that guy just prayed right there. And then I just started thinking, how many people care enough to say thoughts and prayers, but they don't know how to pray?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've led enough fight clubs with men who won't even pray out loud in front of other Christian men.
Yeah.
And they go to church.
Yeah.
And then here's this guy, it's like, hey, I'm going to pray and I'm going to do it right now. And then I just wonder, I mean, this probably wasn't his motive, but how many people are like, oh, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
And, he prayed his heart. And then I have to admit to you, since you asked, my second thought was, now there's going to be some hyper legalist, Bible thumping dude that's going to start analyzing his prayer,
right.
Because Martin, you brought up an excellent point. The guy was probably, he looked nervous.
Oh yeah.
Because his job's on the line. He doesn't, but he's going to obey God, and he's just going to do
millions of people.
He's praying with millions of people watching him in the studio, right? At not just any studio, but ESPN ain't exactly land of the free, and he just got after it.
Yeah.
But I did start thinking about, oh, please don't have some Christian ruin this by going,
Don't we do that though?
Did he pray the right way?
Right. We love.
Did you present the gospel when you prayed?
Yeah.
Did you talk about the redeeming, atoning sacrifice of Jesus on the cross in your prayer? Dude, he was praying for the dude that had a heart attack and still might die.
Yeah.
So I loved it.
I thought it was really cool.
I was glad you shared it.
Yeah.
And Darcy helped me figure out how to reshare it. So
yeah, I thought it was cool, and I think that speaks to exactly what we're talking about this week. And this podcast, something we covered. It would have been a couple weeks ago now that this episode is dropping. But John, when you were preaching in 1 Corinthians chapter 14, and you shared one of your points in the sermon, it was an awesome sermon, very life-giving. I'm not just saying that to blow you up. I'm a dude that came from a place that the teachings you covered hurt, and so it was really good, and I appreciate you covering that the way you did. But you said something in it that really stuck out to me, made me think, created this just, I don't know, sometimes when you leave a sermon, you have a tension, and it's not a bad tension, it's just man, what does that look like for me? What does that look like for me and my wife? What does that look like, not just as a pastor of this church, but as somebody that lives in a community, as somebody that goes to a coffee shop, as somebody that does these things? How do I do this well when I'm not just getting paid for it, right? At least that was the tension I was existing in. I don't know, not everybody else leaves obviously thinking that way. But the verse that you made the point out of, because I was the person, for everybody listening, I was the staff member that was like, yeah, I struggled with the way you said that for a minute. I was like, why would you say excel? I don't know you should. Why'd you? And then I'm like, oh, because that's what the Bible said.
Which was beautiful.
Yeah, but it's 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 12. It says, so also you, since you are zealous for spiritual gifts, this is CSB, seek to excel in building up the church. And I loved that point after reading that, because Paul is pointing to purpose. He's pointing to mission. He's saying, listen, since you're fired up about something, let's get fired up about the right thing. And I think that was just something that, as we were talking yesterday about what the podcast is going to be about, which I'm going to do a better job of in the future, I promise. But it was just like, man, I think this is it. What does this look like for the everyday believer, follower, seeker, laborer in our church, Buckley, Manistee, across the world? How do I practically, tactically seek to excel in building up the church right where I'm at?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we're talking about today. And there was a quote that I saw, and then I'm going to just cut it loose, that I think talked about this. And I would encourage people to think through this lens. Ask me not where I live or what I like to eat. Ask me what I'm living for and what I think is keeping me from living fully for that. So, yeah, with that being said, seek to excel in building up the church.
Can you read the last part of that? It's ask myself, what am I living for? And
ask myself, what am I living for, and what I think is keeping me from living fully for that. So
the way I see that quote fitting perfectly out of that verse from 1 Corinthians 14, chapter 12, that context, as you said, Paul's given the ultimate redirect. Because if you've been with us or you go through 1 Corinthians 14, it was obvious that the Corinthian church is super excited about these dramatic manifestations of the Spirit. Essentially, we could say they're really excited about a personal experience. They're really excited. Maybe this is the day I'm going to speak in tongues. Maybe this is the day I'm going to be the interpreter. Maybe this is the day I'm going to be the prophesier. Maybe we're going to see signs and wonders. And Paul it's a complete jiu-jitsu move or judo move, because he says, since you're eager for manifestations of the Spirit, how about we do this? Strive to excel in building up the church. Yeah. That's the sign and wonder that after 2,000 years, this church that Jesus said, I will build my church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it, is still going.
Yeah.
People are still gathering to worship this man who walked the earth 2,000 years ago, who we claim lives in our hearts and is our hope of heaven, our meaning for right now, who's dealt with our past. That's a miracle.
Yeah.
And so he's redirecting them. And so with the quote that you said is it's not, don't ask this, but ask instead, what am I living for? Am I living for this dramatic personal experience? Those are great.
Yeah.
But instead, what I should be living for is being a part of this mission, this purpose that Jesus is all about.
Yeah.
And in the ESV, and I think it says also in the CSB, strive to excel in building up the church. Not in building up me, not that I'm not going to get built up,
right,
but it's taking that focus off me and instead putting it on the collective.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, the question I would ask to both of you is that, because that's something that I think has happened a ton in the culture today, and it's permeated throughout the world now, is there's this idea, and this is something maybe we talked about a little bit in the Bible overview, but this idea of a personal experience with Christ, or this kind of like personal, like this spiritual journey that you take with Jesus, and it's almost removed this idea of belonging to the body out of it. Like it feels unnecessary at times. And so why do you guys think that is, and what maybe the effects or what causes that, and how that's impacting the believer that's maybe taking that journey?
I think it's a big question, and it's something that can't be answered broad spectrum. But for each individual, I think that there's a tendency to the experiential or the tangible, something that they can wrap their hands around. And even at this table, we have different levels and layers of that. For me, I'm like, I value the experience, and that brings me something, but I will typically try to draw it back to something that I can put my hands on and see. And even in my own personal relationships, I find this with a lot of different people. They're looking for that, and it's not bad. Sometimes we think of it as like, I'm just looking for an experience. I'm looking for the high. So I'm drawn away from the things that might be more concrete. But I think that without both of them, we're lost. And I don't know, I've heard authors say it this way: the experience is a beautiful thing. It's like walking to the ocean, right, and staring out at it and seeing it, and then not knowing what to do from there. A map is less real, but you're going to need one if you're going to go out on that ocean.
Right.
And kind of that perspective for me is, it's hard, because when I think of building up the church, it's very much that. I can see some things. There have been some things I've stepped into. There are times where I'm learning just from what I'm walking into. But if I'm left to just that, it's going to get really messy really quick.
Yeah. Good.
Well, I think, like when I think about that question, where did this idea come from? Sorry, the history teacher kicks in. And depending on which history you want to go with, it was either Depeche Mode who first started talking about personal Jesus, right? Reach out and touch faith. Come on. All my 80s people there. But more than likely, it began, some would say, with evangelists such as Bill Bright, who are great evangelists, not worthy to tie his sandals, but in communicating in his evangelistic messages, he was one of those voices that first, I think in the 60s, really started talking about, do you have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ? Because there's always a spectrum. There's always like, the pendulum swings, and the pendulum had swung so far into this kind of cultural dormant, I'm a Christian because I'm from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I'm a Christian because my grandma was, and she took me to VBS, and I sang the songs, and I put in my offering on my birthday, depending on what your experience was. And he was back to, hey, this, trying to fire up something that's a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more passionate. And I think what's happened culturally is the pendulum swung all the way to the other side, where it's kind of this self-contained, and it's contributed to by the self-help movement and and just our individualistic attitudes as Americans, and more, I don't want to go anywhere. I want to stay home, live on the internet, have my little self-contained type of thing. And I think right now we're seeing the pendulum come back to the middle where it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Because it isn't that I'm each one of us need to have our own relationship with Jesus Christ.
100%.
But it's played out and fleshed out in this communal thing. And you being the youngest of those of us here with microphones, or at least those of us at the table here, right off college campuses, you've seen it more firsthand than we have, of how many people, they don't need the church, young people, young adults, don't need the church, don't need a group. I know what I believe, and I can just live my life kind of, me and Jesus, Jesus is my co-pilot right here. And the problem is it misses the point, especially of the New Testament, where Paul, even in that verse, even in that chapter, he's saying, you're all chasing your own thing.
Yep.
How about we all chase the same thing, which is us, this community, this communal, this together thing.
Yeah, and I think that hits it right on the head with the pendulum picture that you gave, because it's not inherently, whatever the word is, right? Bad to have a personal relationship. It's not what I'm trying to portray in the question, because I think that should be the desire of all of our hearts, to have intimacy with Jesus, to know Him, to know His Word, to know His voice, to be able to apply it to your life, to do those things. But where you're applying it is important, and I think that as well, that aspect plays out in community and in the local church, and there's ways that I know Jesus better because of the people He's put around me.
Right.
I know, and so, but yeah, I agree.
There's a word, or there's a picture that just came to my mind, and maybe it's a bad one. You guys, I trust you both to, just tell me if this makes sense. I'm thinking about the food in my house. So, we have 5 children, a son-in-law and a granddaughter, and over the holidays, there was a lot of us in the house at the same time, which was awesome. 7, 8, so there's 9 of us. There were times when food's in the kitchen, and everybody's doing their own thing, or a group's playing a board game, or someone's downstairs watching video game or playing video games. I'm working in the office. There were some meals where you just came down and you got yours. Mm-hmm. Hey, I'm just going to warm up these leftovers, and that's what I'm going to have. And someone else, well, I'm not real hungry. I'm going to snack on these chips. And they just come at different times in different places.
Which Vermilion Nation has the best snacks. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, Darcy, man, she knows what she's doing. Yeah, and there's no rules. There's no rules. Although these. Sorry, Martin. I know there's some different rules in your house, but there's no rules. Yeah, when guests come, we're like, "There's the snacks. Get them when you want them, because I'll forget." Right.
Praise God.
But back to the point, to the illustration. The better moments was when there was a meal that was prepared, and it was like, "Hey, no, we're not just all going to grab. We're going to pray before this meal, and then we're going to sit down as a family in the kitchen, and we can't even fit them all around the table. We got them some around the table, some around the counter, but that was a meal. That was different. Yeah. There was a conversation. That was community around that shared thing. And so I guess the question is, which one is better? Yeah, you can find some food in the house, but it's not a family meal.
Right.
And everything with Jesus is we're invited into the family of God. We're invited into this community of believers. And just the way He rolled, He met with people individually, but with His 12 disciples, they were running around in a little community,
No, I love that analogy. I think it works because I think for most of us, we grew up in one of 2 households. The household that was everybody's welcome, right? Mom had the door open at all times. Anybody could come in, eat whatever was in the fridge, even if there's nothing in the fridge. And there's a beauty to that. Or that household where it was like, dinner's at 6, you better be home, you better sit at the table. And they're both necessary.
And you can bring your friend to that table.
Yeah, by all means. But there's a different structure. There's something different to it. It talks to our personalities, but as much as that, it gives us something to build around, right? I love that dinner table aspect. I like that our family, we often eat dinner together. We might not do much else together, and my kids are still small, but it gives us something to build around. The conversation to be able to engage about Jesus typically happens around the dinner table. We're scarfing, we're just eating. There's dishes to be done, and there ends up being a lot of moving parts, but you need something to come around sometimes, or it becomes very lone wolf. I'm just going to find some food in the house, and you may never see me. And sorry for all you with teenagers out there, and that's kind of what reality has become. That there's a season for everything, right?
Right.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. No, I think you guys are not, especially as a young adult, like the dude that live by himself. I had the moment where I left the church and I knew better, and it was going to be better the way I was going to do it on my own. And I found myself not even months, weeks later, like, this sucks. This is hard. And I think that the individual that maybe has that relationship that is built on, at the end of the day, I'll say this, self, it's hard. And I think that if you're honest, if you're real, if you look outside of the hurt maybe that you've experienced, the trauma that maybe you have, the unrealistic expectations that you set up that somebody didn't live to, the preferences that you've put in place of something else, or the priorities, and if you look through all of that and you get down to the root of it, you would acknowledge the fact that doing this on your own is hard. No matter what it is, following Jesus, trying to just be a person, right? But it's difficult. And I think that community, there's a reason that was the design. There was a reason that was God's idea. There was a reason that we serve a God that exists in community. And I think that, but all of that to be said, striving to excel in building the church. So that's kind of the big, long explanation of this is why the church is important. This is why we think that it's worth building. And so within that, we'll keep digging in. You said you had some passages.
Yeah. So one that we've referenced quite often. I mean, the Bible is consistent all the way through, and Paul's consistent, and of course the Holy Spirit's going to be consistent in making sure it's the same thing. But Ephesians chapter 4, one that we've referenced quite often, in verse 11, in speaking about the church, actually we'll start in verse 7. No, we're going to start in verse 4. Sorry, this is just one Fight Club style. But Ephesians 4:4. Here's the context. He says, there's one body and one spirit, just as you were called to the one hope that belongs to your call. And then in verse 5, he says, one Lord, one faith, one baptism. Verse 6, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. And then in verse 7, he says, but grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gift. So right there, at least the way I read it, he starts with God. He starts with, one God, one Spirit, one Lord, one faith, one baptism, and you. So that is important. A regenerated heart.
Yeah.
Someone who's received Christ by faith. And he says, there's an individuality to it. In verse 7, grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gift.
Yeah.
But then if you keep reading, you skip down to 11, and then it goes completely communal. So it's individual and communal. And so I don't think any of us are denying the importance of a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. But you get down to verse 11, he says, and he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and the teachers to do what? To equip the saints. Those are the individual parts that have been gifted with this one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one Spirit. To equip the saints for the work of ministry, for building up the body of Christ. Is that just one time? Is that a little bit? No. In verse 13, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. Verse 14, so that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. Rather, speaking the truth in love, we're to grow up in every way into him who is the head of Christ. And this is one of Paul's run-on sentences, so I have to stop someplace.
Yeah.
But my point is he's saying this is how it works. We all have an individual relationship with God. He saves us individually into something corporate. And there's another little picture of the structure.
Yeah.
That we have full-time ministry people that are trying to equip the saints to do what? The work of the ministry. For how long? Until we all grow up and we're all mature.
Yeah.
Here's a question. How mature is our ministry staff?
You can tell by the giggles. Right. The giggles speak for themselves.
The giggles speak for themselves, right? So and if that's true of our church staff, it's true of our church.
Yeah.
How long are we supposed to do that? Until we all grow up into the fullness of the unity that's under Christ? Well, when's that going to happen? When we're dead?
Yeah. And I love, too, that Paul sandwiches that piece of the individual piece, because at the very beginning of that chapter, he starts with bearing with one another in love. And so this whole thing is built out of we're doing this all together.
Yes.
And there's individuals, but we're doing this together. But I love the passage that you hit on, and it's one that at times can fire people up and get them excited, and it's one that at times can frustrate people because it's like, wait, so your job is just to tell me what to get us ready to do the thing that we thought we were paying you to do?
Yeah.
And And so
you said that so fast, I'm not sure if our listeners caught all of it, right? Because there's this attitude that, hey, it's ministry. You guys do ministry. I go to work.
Yeah.
No, we train you to do ministry at work, listener, or at school, or wherever you're at.
Which is unbelievably obvious when you look at it, because we don't have a desire to make sure all the ministry happens in a building in Buckley on Sunday. We want ministry to be going on in the world. That can't happen unless we expand, it grows, it's everybody involved, right? But it's a terrifying thing sometimes. And I was just talking to one of the leaders here that runs our parking team, Denny Nolf, and he was remembering when I invited him to be a part of it. And he goes, you remember that? I was telling you, like, hey, we need to, hey, the schedule, hey, this. And I go, yeah, so you going to do that? And that's probably my most famous line is, cool, you ready to run that? And he stepped in and he got to live it and he did it. But he recognized very quickly that this wasn't about, hey, you should. This was, hey, I've got some ideas I'd like to be a part of. Yeah. Because that's the community, that's the maturing of the community of believers as we do it together and we kind of build it up. Yeah.
Sorry, Martin.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and what's cool about that is while the offices were closed during the holidays, I broke the rules. I saw cars here, and I was driving by, and I had to pick up something. So I was like, oh, cool, it's unlocked. I'm going to go in the church when I'm not supposed to be. And you know who's in here? Denny Nolf. And he was in here with the dude training him up on the computer because he was handing off the ministry to another dude.
No
and I'm like,
to Denny, but how close was his face to the screen?
It was like 6 inches, man. He was like right up in that monitor. But you see the picture I'm talking about is now he's training up others to take over that ministry because, you know, he's involved. Denny's involved in multiple ministries and we're grateful for him.
Yeah.
And I saw this beautiful picture because I found myself remembering when he first joined that team and then led that team. And now he's training up someone else to lead that team because he's got bigger fish. I mean, it's just the way it's supposed to work. That is a picture of a guy who's striving to excel to build up the church. If I can here, I've got a guy that doesn't have a place. He can do this job. And then I can go do more of the other ministries that I'm involved in.
And he's unbelievably relational with it. This isn't just a matter of like, hey, do the things and get the black and white and make sure you button it up. That guy that he's bringing in is fairly new to the church, still making, you know, friends, getting connected, and Denny's one of the first people to reach out that way. And he's like, you know how you get connected? Let me give you an opportunity. Saw a talent and a gift in him, spiritual giftedness, walked it up, made an introduction, and it put him into a place. And, you know, he's sitting at our staff meeting today, and both of these guys are engaged, and we're talking about Jesus. It's very rarely a thing that we're trying to do.
Yeah.
It's always an excuse for us to be together. So that's where that like community of believers, and we're a church, it's all about community. I don't know, there's a piece in this for me that's really, really important. I said it at the beginning, I get off track really easy as an individual. And it seems as if we're reading that in Ephesians as well. And he says, so that we may no longer be children tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, but by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes, rather speaking truth in love. He's going, hey, when you're together, you're probably going to keep where you're supposed to be. And I see that when we come together, when we have staff meetings, we do stuff when we're all in the room. It's like, hey, you got off track a little bit there. Sometimes we get a little weird with my thinking. Yeah. And it draws us back into a place where we have some guardrails. Mm-hmm. And it's not just rules and doctrine and theology. It's oftentimes just a brother willing to go, hey, really? That's where you want to be on that one? Like John Williams is about as good as anybody in this church with that.
Yeah, I love that. And you guys are hitting on some stuff that I was hoping that this would get to, and that thought that you guys both shared with Denny. And I'm just curious in you guys' experience, the stories, maybe if both of you can think of an example or a time where you saw somebody they had no idea what they were doing. And the fact of building, excelling and building up the church when they stepped into it. And now when you look back at it, it's like, oh man, look what God did. And so I don't know if you guys have any stories that come to mind.
There was actually, and I don't know this story at all, but going back to the very first thing you talked about on this podcast, I don't know where Dan, how do you say his last name, Orlovsky, I don't know where he went to church when he was a little kid. I don't know if he didn't get saved till college or if his girlfriend took him to church. I don't know what church he was in that taught him how to pray. I don't know what sermon he was listening to that said, don't be afraid. I don't know where he learned as a disciple to listen to the still small voice. But it all came together the morning after that horrible NFL incident at his job.
Yeah.
When he felt God compelling him to lead us all in prayer. And so I don't think it's too big a jump to say that whoever those people were, those, dare I say it, dominoes in his life, they had no idea that one day he was going to be an ESPN talking head.
Right.
And then put his reputation, his job, what other people thought about him on the line. And then if that's not Ephesians 4, I don't know what is, because there were obviously apostles, prophets, evangelists, shepherds, and teachers that equipped him to do the work of the ministry.
Yeah.
Because I can't get that out of my head is, what about our opportunities at work? Maybe not to pray out loud, but maybe, or maybe to do something else, right? So that's just one example of people. But, as far as, people that strive to excel to build up the church, anyone who serves.
Yeah.
Anyone who serves that's one part of it. Another one I was thinking about is just 2 nights ago, we were in a meeting together here in the dungeon, or just outside the dungeon door, in the other part of the dungeon, the war room, with Martin. How many guys we have there?
21.
We had 21 guys, and you took a picture, and I didn't get a picture.
And there was no dinner. Oh, what?
And
Sorry, my bad.
I had chicken wings.
But we had 21 dudes who are all either leading a fight club, co-leading a fight club, or should or could be leading a fight club. They all came together for about an hour and a half, 2 hours, to talk about how do we strive to excel to build up the church in raising up more faithful men so we can multiply.
And about
That was a perfect example. Yeah.
half of those dudes would have told you, no way me, at some point.
Yeah.
So you asked specifically people that didn't even realize they were doing it. So I love John's example of Orlovsky and everybody that went into his story. I love the guy next to him that went, yeah, do it.
Right.
That was all we heard. I don't know his name. I didn't hear anything about him. But when he started praying, he's like, I don't know if I'm supposed to. He goes, yeah, do it. That's striving to excel, to build up the church.
He was encouraging him. Yeah, that's an excellent point.
That was Rachel Voris. I'm stealing that one, by the way. But I'll give you another example. There was a student 4 or 5 years ago when I first got here. This dude was a massive man of a student, but he was just one of those naturally charismatic people.
Benji doesn't like it when you talk about him.
Benji still wasn't massive yet.
Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. My bad. Yeah.
No, this dude, and he's as rough around the edges as you can imagine, and he didn't have all of the stuff figured out. But he was a guy that people followed and he led. And it was crazy to see him sitting in the midst of a meeting, we're preaching, whatever it was, a small group, and guys are trying to, just screwing around. And this guy would just be like, no, I think that makes sense. That might be all he'd say. Or he'd just nod at the right time. And guys, other teenage boys would look over and be like, he's 9 feet tall. He's, probably right. Let's just agree. He ended up becoming a leader. And, he struggled over the course of these last several years, and he's found his way back. He has no idea what he's doing to encourage me, what he did to encourage other guys. There are other guys, I promise you, that have stuck with only because he was there long enough to keep them going. We don't always see it. It's not always in the clear spiritual gifts that we like to think they are.
Yeah.
Here's another one. Our prayer teams.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes, how many services at the Buckley campus are they up front available after if anyone wants to pray with them? And sometimes they do, and there's a lot of services where no one comes up to pray.
Yeah.
But they're always praying before, praying after, praying during the week. I'm not trying to use Christian cliche, but they're striving to excel to build up the church. 100%. One of the best ways they can.
Yeah.
It's just interceding on our behalf.
Yeah.
And
what's one of my favorite stories, and I won't mention names or who the student was, but we have we were able to stream our services to a lot of places and on a lot of platforms. And I remember Pastor Seth, our Manistee campus pastor, my boss man, was telling a story about his neighbor that was homebound. She could not leave her house for any sort of reason. She had the nurse that came and visited, did all the stuff. And I remember we as a church took communion one weekend together, and one of you guys, I think it was you or Ben or Tim or somebody, walked them through what it looks like to take communion and invited the people that were at home to join in that. I remember Seth telling the story of just how excited she was because for so long she had no idea that she could do that. Sitting at home, she got to feel like she was a part of the church. She got to be a part of it again. And it's because some student pushed record and it went out. And that's such a thankless job that nobody knows about because they sit in this truck that's hot and smells like dust. But they're doing it. And that's why Swerve, dude, that's like the whole vision behind it. There's so much happening at our church.
What's Swerve?
What's Swerve? Students who serve. But yeah, but it's just there's so much going on at our church that people have no idea the difference they're making. And I think that's the whole thing. And I loved the way you hit on it. It wasn't the strong arm, we've got to do better. It was, guys, we're doing it.
Yeah.
And for the person sitting in the room that was like, I got to do better. You do. If the Spirit of God told you that, do better. But for the person in there, be encouraged that God is using you in the most mundane spaces. And I love that picture of the gospel moving into the old lady's house that couldn't barely get out of the recliner to go get the communion elements.
Right.
But she did it, and she was a part of the body, and she felt like she belonged to something when she probably hadn't in a long time because some 14-year-old pushed a button.
Right.
That's just cool. I don't know. Those are the things. That's striving to excel in building up the church, and that's the vision you want people to grab a hold of, right? That's why we have a team that does the cafe, and we don't just put the coffee on the edge, because that interaction matters. That's why we encourage people to go out to work. And one of the strongest challenges from a dude that we both like to read, he talks about not doing self-checkout anymore. Stand in line. Build the church. You got a chance. And it's like, man.
Now, wait a second. What? Wait, what? Explain that for our peeps.
So I don't need to name drop the whole thing because it's a whole movement that's gotten taken
why?
too far.
Why? Like break it down. Why? Because in a day and age where I can self-check out and not talk to anybody or interact with anybody, why are you? And maybe it's not for everybody, but you're feeling compelled to do the checkout line.
Well, I do it
because that takes longer.
Because I don't like scanning stuff. I hate it. I'm not an expert bagger. Meyer has not trained me to be doing these things, and so that's why I do it, because there are trained professionals there to be doing this. But no, he just talks about in his book that there are times and places that we feel like we got to get this done as fast as we can because there's somewhere else we can go be productive for Jesus. Why not the grocery store? Why not be interruptible in this place? Stand in the line, and with the person with the cart in front of you that looks like, man, there's a lot of cereal in there. She looks tired. Oh, there's 4 kids running around on the other side of the store that she keeps looking at. Those are probably hers. I should probably encourage her right now. And this is my chance to be the hands and feet of Jesus in line at the grocery store instead of hood on, hat down, head down, scan my pizza rolls and get the heck out of there because I'm single, 24, and more important. But I think that there's just no personal experience in that.
You're not 24.
I'm no longer 24.
Because I've been standing in line for 2 years. But yeah, I just think that there's so many mundane spaces where you can strive to build the church that people forget about.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I love about this church especially. We're not perfect. We don't always know what we're doing.
Amen.
But we tell people right where they're at is where they're supposed to be. And I love that mission. I love that the person listening to this, you can do it. It's not about achieving or finding another platform or getting to another place. And at times that you can sit in a service and it feel like, man, I'm not inviting people into my house and leading the whole Bible study and I'm not fluent in this. No, dude, you know how to put the lug nuts on? I don't. I didn't even know they made a locking one. I thought my wheels would never come off when I was in high school. All right. But it's like, no, there's a time and a place.
Yeah.
And I love that. And I think that for the people listening to this, when I heard that sentence, strive to excel in building up the church, that's why we're sitting here.
Yeah.
Because somebody bought into that vision, even if it wasn't said just like that 20 years ago. Yeah. Shoot, close to 100. I don't know how long this church has been here longer, and I've been alive way longer.
It's about 100 years, yeah.
Because people have just been doing it.
Yeah.
And so for the church that's listening to this today, the Tabernacle church that's listening to this today, let's keep going and let's not think that we need a new plan.
No, we don't.
This one works.
Amen.
That's outstanding.
Yeah.
For 2,000 years, the church has been God's plan.
Yeah.
Let's just keep doing it.
Yeah.
But he says strive to excel in doing it.
Yeah.
So this isn't like a little trick move for us to get more people hooked in. But we've been talking a lot in this strive to excel to build up the church. There's giving, there's serving, there's inviting, there's participating. And it is true that there is something in it for me. It is true that when I serve, I build community. So now, it is true when I participate in a fight club or a women's Bible study, or I go to Foundry. Now when I go to church on a weekend, people know me. It is true that when I give to a church, I am more invested in the mission and in what's happening at that church, and I might be bothered enough to go to a members meeting, All of those things are true, but all of those things do have a payoff for me, but that's not the primary goal. Because when those things become the primary goal, it reverts back to what's in it for me.
Yep.
But when we're all mission focused with that, I want to strive to build up the church. No, I want to strive to excel in building up the church. That's when the spark hits the gasoline.
Yeah.
And it does so relationally, but it also does it for the church. So there is a payoff for me, but only as I'm focused on keep it pushing and getting after it.
I got a story that goes with
Go
that.
for it, yeah.
One of my favorite things that I've talked to somebody this past year, and as most people know, we've talked about it, I think, in sermons on the podcast, we're revamping, remodeling, rebuilding our Tab Kids space in Manistee.
Yes.
It's sweet. They put carpet in. Pretty sure I was like 90% high from the glue that was seeping into my office yesterday.
You're huffing?
My next sermons are going to be ridiculous.
I just said huffing in the podcast.
But they're doing this awesome space. But there was a member of our church that serves in multiple ministries. But as I was talking to this individual, he said, man, I would be lying if I said I am not pumped to start serving in Tab Kids in that space again.
Yes.
And I was like, well, why are you so, you've been serving in Tab Kids. Why are you so excited? Because there'll be walls again. And he's like, no. I gave money towards that.
Nice.
And now I get to be a part of using it.
Nice.
And it's like, that's cool because there's tangible, that is that piece
He's
of like,
invested.
man, when we gave the big give challenge, somebody gave towards that. I'm not going to tell them that somebody donated the whole thing, but but there's that whole piece.
But we need them both.
Right.
Yeah.
But he's fired up because he was a part, because he was, of getting that remodel done. And now he gets to be a part of using that remodel to see the next generation equipped with the gospel. And it's just like, oh, it fires me up. It gets me so pumped.
See, I love that it fires you up because your generation is stereotypically kind of given this idea that like you're desperate to be a part of something, some bigger than yourself, right? And we see that all the time. And then the church is kind of the unpopular way to do that right now. But the word that's used in this, that strive, is sometimes in Christian circles kind of a dirty word, right? Yeah. We're not allowed to strive. We talk a lot here about
ambition. Yeah.
Or even just like performance-based acceptance.
Effort. Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, well, how does this fit? And sometimes it actually makes me uncomfortable because I'm the guy that, like, I'm strive king. Like, I want to strive. If we can just strive, I feel better about striving.
Yeah.
Am I allowed?
Everybody would just strive with me. We'd be striving.
Yeah. But that dude was striving by what he was doing to be a part of something that he then, you kind of feel like maybe there's a selfish aspect of it. It's like, yeah, that's okay. Because the word that's actually used there, I don't think it's best described as strive. It actually, from what I was looking up, it's to abound or overflow. So to overflow, to excel, means somebody's giving it to you first. And when we recognize who gives us the money that he gave to give, the energy he had to give to those kids, when we realize that we're overflowing and giving back, and that's what striving looks like, and it's not just like, I'm going to work hard, how's Foster put it? We'll just go row harder. Yeah. Just going to row harder. Yeah.
No, it's not about making myself. No, I see what you're saying.
It's recognizing that, hey, you've just literally been given so much, and now you get to be a part of something bigger than you as you give it back.
Right.
And that, to me, like when you make that transitional change, it's unbelievably empowering because 100%. I think sometimes, and just having talked to a few of our volunteers and a few of our volunteers later, sometimes we can get frustrated because church of 1,000 people should never want for an usher. Yeah, we could probably afford automatic doors if we needed to. It's not about the stuff.
Yeah.
But then they start to realize not everybody knows why we're doing this stuff, why we're striving.
Right.
And we ask ourselves, why am I striving? Because Jesus gave me a whole bunch. So I'm going to give some back.
Yeah. And I love, too, the picture that you gave with overflowing, and that puts it in the context of those spiritual gifts. That God is the one that gave you those gifts. Now overflow with those gifts and use them to build his church.
Yeah.
And I love that. I'm glad you brought that word into it. That's a cool picture.
So you got me looking up definition of strive while we were dive bombed by some sort of fly that's awake.
I thought all the flies died this time of year.
Yeah, I thought it was January. What's happening? Yeah. Strive, to make great efforts to achieve or obtain something, to struggle or fight vigorously. And another translation when I was preparing that message, to pursue. So it's almost like the same as our vision statement. If you know anything about a vision statement with an organization, a vision statement honestly should not be something that you can achieve in this lifetime. It's always out there. It's that proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. And for us, our vision statement is change lives. Yeah. And so with our leaders, with our board, we're always talking about, okay, have we changed enough lives yet? No, it's more changed lives. It's always more and more and more. It's the same thing with our striving to excel to build up the church. Is if we're striving, pursuing, working hard to achieve and obtain, it's not just to turn us into people that never leave.
Right.
But like we've already talked about, there's opportunities to do that within the church. There's opportunities to do that seen, but there's also opportunities to do that outside the church in ways that are unseen.
Yeah.
You know, when you were asking for examples, I don't want to share this person's name, but it's a person that's been a part of the worship team in Buckley. And, you know, I didn't know, a whole ton about her, but she was worked with Matt and Vicky and was a vocalist. And then I think had her second child, maybe, and then kind of disappeared for a while. Not from church, but, now she's, a nursing mom and has 2 kids and trying to be a mom and a wife and all that kind of stuff. But she found a way to stay engaged. While she'd been a vocalist, she was blessed by other people. Here in Buckley, just the behind the scenes is our worship teams start their practice early on a Saturday afternoon, and then they do the first service on Saturday night and then on Sunday. And so we have people in striving to excel to build up the church that would bring food on Saturday night for the tech team, the creative arts team, the pastoral team that's going to spend most of their weekend hanging around T2. For that time that she was not singing, she took over the organization of that team. And, just like she's bringing meals herself once a month, getting other people to bring meals. And there's always food on Saturday night.
Good food too.
Never
been disappointed.
Never. Yeah. It's always different. There's always a little something sweet, and some people might say, well, that's frivolous. Why can't you just bring your own snack? Well, here's someone who's striving to excel to build up the church. And so for almost a year and a half, she's never on stage. And I wondered, if people wonder, where she's at. And they have no idea she's still in the game.
Yeah.
She's doing her part. And then just a couple weeks ago, she was singing again. But she's still coordinating the food. Yeah. And it was like, I wonder if some people look at her and go, oh, it must be nice to have a good voice and the confidence to get up there and sing. They have no idea that for a year and a half, 2 years, however long it's been, she's been doing this mundane, behind-the-scenes ministry that matters, that makes us better, and makes people who are also striving to excel to build up the church better.
Yeah.
And, there's big ways, there's small ways.
Yeah.
So I have to qualify by saying I had a small part in that because I originally killed the team that she then once took over. So I'm the evil one in that situation. But what's cool about that is I can actually smile and be grateful for that.
What? Why would he possibly want to kill that team?
So there was a time where that team had been doing it for years, and most of the people on that team had come to a point
why would he ever want to kill food?
Because they were worn out, and this is kind of what I'm getting to. They didn't want to be providing.
I wonder where that food went.
Definitely on me.
Well, I'm glad I showed up.
COVID hit. Come on, things got really hard. We didn't.
Anyway,
know
sorry, Mark. Sorry. You were trying to make a point.
But
turn your mic.
Turn my mic straight there. Thank you.
Talking about Benji, that's a real producer right there.
That.
He's striving to excel to build the church in this podcast
by making sure that the words that are said
talking to the mic.
Now I will sit much.
There you go. Anyway, so Martin, you were trying to say there was a time when
there's a point. Oh yeah,
when you killed food.
I killed food for our production team because the team had they'd done their thing for so long. It was just a staple. It just had to be right.
They
it was
striving
what we did. And many of them were serving in other areas where they're much more engaged. And this is something that I think our church as a whole has created as a piece of the culture. We are willing to create an opening so that people can find this place. We are not the church that's like, oh, let's slim down and not, the story I think you use often is the parking lot. We look here at T2, we've got a parking lot across the street, and it was like, we'll never be able to get people safely across the road. And it was like, sounds like an opportunity to make a team, to give somebody a chance to be able to step into a giftedness. All those guys we talked about at the beginning on our parking team, they found a spot. They don't really like to talk to people a lot, so greeter was not for them. But because we did that and we saw that as an opportunity, it's the same as the meals team. Yep. Sometimes creating the space for people, because we don't all know what this looks like. It's tangibly, it's weird.
You spoke to something that I want to hit on for a second. So what would you, because there's people that maybe have strived, have been striving, or whatever that might be. But you said something, they weren't striving anymore.
Yeah.
And there's a place where people get into, whether it's complacency, you get irritated, whatever that might be. But speak to kind of what you were hitting on with that piece of like, what would you say to the individual that maybe, and you hit on it, the men that have stepped away, I've done it. Speak to that.
So you use the word complacency, and one of the reasons that I said what I said in the message was, and especially for men, they have to stay in the game, they have to stay in the mission, is sometimes, okay, I get really good at whatever it was that I was a brick in the wall. I was another brick in the wall. We talked about Denny before. I don't know what Denny's goal is in extricating himself from the leadership of the parking team, but knowing him, it's because he's got other things that he's got his eyes on. He started getting involved with the creative arts team, playing the drums. I know he's involved with Fight Club. I know he's leading men's groups. And we can either pull back from everything or we can reproduce ourselves, meaning, hey, I'm going to train up a second. I'm a Fight Club leader, but I'm going to train up a second. Not so I can get out of Fight Club and not do it anymore, so that I can move into another area that maybe I wasn't ready for at the beginning. And so I think what happens is it's a mentality shift. And I thought about bringing this up at our meeting that we had with Fight Club leaders.
That had no dinner. Yep.
That had no dinner. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm going to strive to excel to bring some dinner to that meeting. But here, if you think about it, if we just had a table full of Legos right here, and all we ever did was put the reds with the reds and the blues with the blues and the flat pieces here and the curved pieces here and the little weird hands that come off of the Lego people. I don't know. I don't do Legos. That's Tim Burgess and Ben Brown's family more than mine. But if all we ever did was move Lego blocks around, we're doing something, but there's no purpose. There's no purpose. And I think sometimes, and it makes sense in my brain, I think I'm answering your question, when people think, oh, I'm just supposed to serve because I'm supposed to, we're just moving blocks around. But when we take those same Legos and we start stacking them, and you said it, none of us knows exactly what this is supposed to look like. It's because it's not ours. Christ said in Matthew 16, I will build my church. He's using us as masons, as shape. Now I'm getting into construction. I better be careful. We all have different jobs on the job site, but now we're starting to put those blocks together and it's becoming a structure. There's a purpose to it. Yeah. There's a mission. And so I may not do this. I may not do the same service that I did when I first came to church. But if all you ever treated as I've done my duty, you're just moving blocks around.
Yeah.
But when it's like, okay, I was involved in that, but now I'm ready for this. I was just a Fight Club. Well, I was just a church attender, but now I'm a Fight Club attender. I was just a Fight Club attender, but now I'm going to be a co-leader. I was just a co-leader, and not just I moved from co-leader to now I'm ready to lead my own thing, to now I'm ready to lead something that's producing other leaders. Yeah. Now I feel a part of things. And so really the call was to kind of see the second half of that verse in building up the church. Yeah. It may change according to the season of life that I'm in, or my giftedness, or my ability to give, or my ability to. I mean, there's going to come a time when we're not going to be able to preach. That's scary. It's like, what am I going to do then?
Right.
because I can't keep two thoughts together, and I can't stand, and I'm bent over, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm wearing Depends. How am I going to strive to excel to build up the church then?
Yeah.
That's a really good point, because I've seen friends and family, people that are close to me, that they get mixed up on what it has to look like, or they've got a desire and expectation of what it should look like next, right? We've all seen somebody that was like, I think I should probably be preaching. And it was like, well, okay, maybe, where, when, how? And when that doesn't come, they don't take the next step and go, I have a doctor's visit. I'm going to just engage this nurse.
Yeah.
I think Tim Burgess tells a story about how he had a doctor's appointment, saw the nurse. It's not a matter of trying to get to where you think you ought to be. Oftentimes, the call comes very straightforward as a call. And by the way, Denny is going to be supporting groups, home groups, as a church in general. So
Cool.
that was his hey, I've been doing this parking thing for a while. I've run 4 groups at a time for, I don't know, years. You need any help? And I was like, yeah, we could use some help. We're struggling to be able to coordinate our home groups and keep them updated on our webpage and stuff. You want help? Yeah, I'm in. All right, you got to get rid of parking first. Oh, good, I got a guy. He's already worked that. So.
Yeah, that's cool. And something you hit on is something that Foster has hit on a lot with us. Most people, I can just say Foster, and they know.
Mm-hmm.
Is that shift from duty and discipline to delight and desire.
Yes.
And how you see that start to bring life into you and to the people that you're serving. Because at the end of the day, people know, students especially, I've noticed that with them, they know when that leader's there because they have to, because they're obligated, because they signed the paper at the beginning of the year, and it's their duty. They're going to be disciplined. They're going to show up. But then they can also see it when that leader's there that's excited, that finds happiness, joy in getting to serve those students, that desires every Wednesday to show up and show off. I mean, you don't have the episodes like we had where Sam Brown talks about the Brad Kropas that came from working with his hands and tired, and it's difficult, to being at Foundry, getting after it, smoking the kids at 9 Square, leading the small group, talking about all the random things ninth graders talk about, but he's pumped about it. And I think that's the difference.
Yeah.
So what do you do when you've hit that point? So, because Brad was at that leaders meeting the other night, and he was honest about hey, man, Fight Club has become hard, and they're just tougher than everybody else. They meet at 10 o'clock at night, and they go
after
until
serving at Foundry.
Yeah.
But he was communicating. He's like, I'm exhausted, and some days it's hard to get after it. What do you do when you hit that? All right, maybe this season is changing.
Yeah.
And all too often, I think the answer is just I'm going to take some time off. It's an indefinite amount of time, and it might be forever, but.
So they get it half right. And I don't think it's that the season is changing. It's really talking about momentum. We've lost momentum. You can lose momentum personally. When too many people in a church lose momentum personally, then the church loses momentum collectively. If you're in a group and the group's lost momentum, it isn't that, the season is changing. Yeah, there's a change, and that, the ball's rolled to a stop. I think you hit on something. It's not pull back and quit. Change something.
Yeah.
Change the format. Change where you meet. Change the makeup of the group. I believe, and I want to pick on men because that's what we do. We kick men in the batteries. That's just what we do. Is because we are one, and it wouldn't be appropriate the other way.
Right.
I think as men, we lose momentum because everything stayed the same, and we don't want to move to that next thing. And so, for example, a lot of guys that have been there and done that with Fight Club, and now they don't think they need it, I think that they were supposed to start a new one with new faces and new guys that weren't in Fight Club, and they lost their momentum of what they were getting out of Fight Club because of exactly that. It was what they could get out of it instead of what they could get or put into it.
Yeah.
Now, that's not me talking about Brad Krupa.
No.
When you go to, that guy's a stud. He's a discipleship group leader for my own son.
Yeah.
And so when he's invested right there, what I would say to him is something might need to change. You might need to have your Fight Club on a different night or a different morning or at a different time, because if you're too tired, and it's easy to just to use him as an example. And so momentum is all about change, and it can be a small change, it can be a big change. But what the change is that we don't want is if you've lost momentum and you're striving to excel to build up the church, don't stop building up the church.
Yes.
Find a different way. Find a different
Yeah.
Find a different avenue. Find a different,
I just think that's the default is I'm going to pull back the reins. I must be tired. And it's not, there are people that maybe, you've been running hard. You need to spend more time with your family. It's not just about it. But I think what it comes down to is what is your heart for what you're doing?
Yeah.
If the heart of what you're doing is built out of, I've got to do this so that Jesus will approve or love me, whatever that is, that's where you're missing it.
Yeah.
But if you're in it for the right reasons, you're getting after it and you're striving to build his church, this is a controversial thing. And I understand I'm the dude at the table that is only married to one person and we have no kids and we've got a little bit of extra time. Sometimes it might mean doubling up, push more in the pot, put more in it. See, and I think that's uncomfortable, it's unpopular, and that's coming from the guy that the perceived can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But switch it up, do something, but push.
Yes, and it's got to be okay that we, for those of us that are built that way, or that's where we're at, it's something to try. And I love what John said, because it's a matter of making an adjustment or a change and trying something different. There's plenty of places we lose momentum in our life, and I'll go with your marriage analogy. If you're losing momentum in your marriage, you're starting to feel like things aren't once what they were. I'm not telling you to spice it up with something dirty or wrong. I'm telling you to maybe take a deep breath, consider, how am I treating my wife on a regular basis? Something should probably change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe take a risk and, I don't know, cook dinner for her. Something can change. And when we do that in small areas, it have big impacts. I mean, our church, our word for the year was momentum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what we did was we took a look at all our ministries and we went, all right, what do we need to continue to move forward? And we started asking really tangible things in different areas. And some of them were really simple. We were like, you know what? This space needs a facelift, because that, just like your buddy, is like, there's walls now.
Yeah.
This is exciting. There's momentum in this. It doesn't always have to be the biggest, most structural thing. Sometimes it's just
Sometimes it's a coat of paint.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a new person. It's a new leadership. It's a change up in the sermon series.
Yeah.
One thing I want to make clear is this isn't three pastors bashing our church.
Not at all.
And not that anyone has.
No.
Is as I think back about how many people are striving to excel to build up the church. We're a church that does have momentum, and we have so many people that are doing that.
Yeah.
We're inviting more people to participate in that because we haven't thought of all the ways yet that we can strive to excel to build up the
100%.
church. I've heard wiser men than all of us combined say things like, we have every skill, ability, person, and personality already in our church to do everything that we need. We have all the money that we need within our church. Some of it has been put in the offering. Mm-hmm. Some of it's still in our pockets.
Yeah.
We have every gift and talent that we need at our church to do what God has called us to. Some of them are being used. Some of them are still waiting for someone to go do it. Mm-hmm. So we have all the pieces that we need. It's about, I'm going to say it, leaning in.
Sit into it.
Sitting in.
Now don't point at me.
Pressing
I'm a
in.
Product of Seth Bush.
Yeah.
When he says that to you every day.
Yeah.
Just sit into it.
But we're just sitting into, when we decide to get after what he's got for us, and, I feel just a little bit bad because, we're doing it. Mm-hmm. Just keep doing it, but we're trying to invite others into it. So I was thinking about just this, some of the behind the scenes meetings, because we had a weird 2022, 2023 little changeover. December, Christmas falls on a Sunday.
Yep.
And so does New Year's. And it became, we're going to have church. Now I don't want to sell anybody out, but it's like, we're going to have church. And people have heard me say publicly, I think it's a good idea to go ahead and have church on Jesus' birthday, if it falls on a Sunday. I mean, that's what we do every weekend. Why not do it on Christmas, right? But for a half second, among staff and key leaders, board members or whoever, it's like, well, will people come? That's not my problem. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be there. This is what I'm called to do. And even if I wasn't the preacher, I think I'd go to church on Christmas Day. That's just me. Yep. But if somebody doesn't want to, that's fine. But then it became the question of, what about the people that make it happen? The ushers. Are we going to have a band? Are we going to have enough people that are willing to give up Christmas morning to play worship music for Jesus on Christmas, which happens to be his birthday? And so it was like, put out the word.
Mm-hmm.
We did not suffer one bit. Now, that's not to put anyone down that was like, no, absolutely not. I won't be there on Christmas. That's not what I'm saying.
Yep.
I'm saying we have people that are striving to excel to build up the church. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is I was over the holidays, approached by a staff member from another church that wanted to know how bitter and burnout and tired our staff is because we had Christmas Eve services, Christmas Day services, and we also had Saturday night service here on New Year's Eve, and we had church on New Year's Day. Unthinkable. Like, this is America's drinking holiday. And he was like, man, how burnout and tired and bitter is your staff? And I was like, I don't think they are.
I can go ahead and attest. There's nobody on our staff that was whining and crying about being here. Now, do we tend to put it out and like, oh, the volunteers will be? Volunteers have a great time. They really enjoyed it. Now, there were weather and all the weird stuff that went on, but I'm going to say thank you to those churches that chose not to, because I got to see some old friends that day, and that's not a shot.
We got to meet some new people.
Yeah.
No.
But at the end of the day,
that's good.
Grateful.
Yeah.
That is not a shot. That is, thank you for saying that, because you know my heart, and my heart is not to say,
no.
But I did check myself, and I found myself on New Year's Sunday talking to staff, a couple staff people that were sitting over before the service started, and I said, hey, am I just that blind boss that has, my Steve Carell right now that has no idea that everybody hates me right now because we went head-to-head church on Sunday, even though it was on New Year's Day and on Christmas? And both of them were like, no, this is kind of where we want to be. And so I was just starting to think that how cool is it to have a culture where our staff is striving to excel?
Yeah. No, I'm with it. I agree. And that's, for Hope and I, this was our first Christmas together. And we were just talking about it. And there were like, we don't have kids. And somebody would be like, oh, whatever. I don't care about your opinion. But there was that moment where it was like, whoa, we're not going to get to be with our family on Christmas, quote unquote. But man, we were with our family. Like, well said. Christmas Eve was fun. Like, that was some of the most fun I've had at church in a while. It got me excited for like, man, Steve, we need to grow, because Saturday night was popping. And it was just like, this was cool. This was exciting. And Sunday, sure, it was light, but man, we had good breakfast. Yeah. And we were all there. The coffee was hot.
Our families wanted to be here with us. I mean, I love you guys. You're my family. My daughter wanted to be in the nursery. Yeah. My wife, I don't know how many places she chose to serve that day, but that's the thing is it was like, no, honestly, your party's going to be better than ours. You're worshiping Jesus. You got better music, right?
And I think what it boils down to is the heart. And it's not, it is at the end of the day. And I think that the more I get to continue doing ministry and meet with people that are serving and have conversations around these topics, is at the end of the day, what all of this, striving to excel in building up the church, serving, giving, whatever it is, it boils down to, why are you doing it? And if your heart is fixed on Jesus, if your eyes are fixed on Jesus, if you are remembering the man that didn't have to come, but decided to come hang on a cross, to die for us, to raise from a grave, to defeat Satan, sin, and death forever, man, for the lack of a better term, where the heck else would you rather be?
Yeah.
And if that's an issue, I'm sorry, but I love you enough to say it. You need to check your heart. If serving Jesus has become mundane, if it has become a task or a duty, if it's become something that isn't full of joy, I don't think you're serving Jesus. You might be serving an idol you're calling Jesus. Because the true Jesus came to bring life, and life to the fullest, an abundant life, and that's found through serving and sacrifice and difficulty and success and excellence and fails. But at the end of the day, he's still God. We're still not. He's on the throne, and it's all worth it. And I think that whenever we get back as a church, and I say get back, we're there. I see it all the time. I'm not, but for the individual maybe that's listening to this, that's struggling with this aspect, or maybe you have and you've came out of it and you're like, man, you know what? It's your heart. To the person that, man, reading my Bible in the morning is getting mundane. I'm 4 days into this new Bible reading plan for my resolution. It's getting hard. Check your heart. Why are you doing it? If you're tired of the worship music, check your heart, because we're not worshiping you. It's all of it. And I'm talking to myself. Dude, I texted you the other day, and I'll just be transparent. Launching this young adults ministry is terrifying.
Right.
Like, how the heck am I going to do this?
Right.
What, 2 campuses at once with another campus that we do Foundry at? And we got to, how the heck are we going to do this? And it was sitting down in my easy chair with my notebook. Why are you doing it?
Right.
All right. If that's why, if you can be honest with yourself and say, that's why you're doing it, go.
Yeah.
You'll never fail.
And if we're not careful, our heart goes to a place where we're doing it for reasons that maybe outside of the church seem right.
Mhm.
Well, I think they need. Well, okay, that'll do for a minute while you find it, and thanks for your help. But when I see volunteers step into a role where they just think that there's a need to be filled, they're wholeheartedly less engaged. They're typically not passionate about it. More often than not, it's not in their giftedness. They find themselves frustrated, embittered, and eventually burn out. I don't see that from somebody who's passionate about why they're doing what they're doing. It was one of my first years here. I had a volunteer. They were really entrenched, serving in about 8 different places, and we'd had the conversation like, I think maybe you need to just take a step back, reevaluate where your priorities are. What do you love to do? What do you want to be a part of? Because all of this, and they were just livid with me. How do you have not enough volunteers? That's why I'm doing it. And I was like, I don't think that that's what this is meant to look like.
Yeah.
And that volunteer has since burned out, moved on, and gone somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, as much as the church, like, we love people jumping in and serving, what we need to understand is Jesus doesn't need us to do anything.
That's good.
Jesus is
Yeah.
going to do what he wants to do. He doesn't need our help, but man, he lets us be on his team.
We're invited
Right?
in.
I remember
Yeah.
being a little kid, and we'd go play basketball, and it'd be 3-on-3. And my brother, might not look like it now. No offense, bub. We're working on it. All right. But he used to be a heck of an athlete.
Sorry,
Hey, I'm right there with you. But they'd be playing 3-on-3. I remember this like it was yesterday. 3-on-3, him and his buddy. And they'd always let me be on their team. We'd play the other neighborhood kids. Man, we beat the brakes off these fools. I wouldn't score 1 point. I didn't have 1 rebound. And they dang sure didn't pass me the ball. But I left a winner every single time because my brother could dunk in 9th grade.
Right.
And it's like, and in the neighborhood, I was the king because my brother could dunk. And it's like, I think
Wow.
that's what we get to be a part
That's
of.
a great picture.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
now, bub, I'm just saying, you probably can't touch net. But working on it April 1st, baby. Let's go.
We're not afraid. I was thinking about there was a season where I found myself talking with a lot of people that say, hey, I just don't feel it anymore, or I'm feeling complacent, I'm feeling stagnant. Typically, a lot of these conversations were happening on the road with young adults, have kind of lost that fire. And my go-to question, my answer was a question, and it was always, oh, really? Where are you serving? Well, I'm not right now because I'm not feeling it. There's the problem.
Yep.
We've talked about it before. It's one of the legs of the stool of discipleship that most people miss when you're not attached to the mission, not serving for serving's sake.
Yeah.
But when you're serving for the sake of striving to excel to build the church, we stay fired up.
Nobody has ever started getting momentum with their car in park.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's mundane, but it's true.
Yeah, I'd encourage the listener maybe that's listening to this, that's struggling with that, lost the fire, whatever it is. Get a piece of paper out and you write down the day you gave your life to Christ. What all happened? Did somebody have coffee? Was there a meal? Was the camp set up? Was there a speaker?
Someone invites you.
Write down how many yeses it took that day, including Jesus's yes, for you to get there. Remember those, because they didn't have to be there,
right,
but they said yes,
and
you could be a part of that. So, yeah,
Well
I think that's
well said.
And that's all I have to say about that.
Good job, Forrest.
Yeah.
Well played.
Man, the other night I watched Sling Blade for the first time.
Oh,
Ain't got no gas in it.
Sling Blade, so good. Now I want to watch it again.
And that's where we took the turn. So
I'm gonna make me some of them biscuits.
Yeah, French fried taters.
French fried taters.
Buster be fine.
Oh, he's so good in that show. Goodness sakes.
When is the last time you watched that?
It's got to be 10 years.
I was going to say, this is why I love John, because you watched it last week and you're referencing it. It is 10 years ago and he's got it. And I'm like, I've seen it.
In John's
French fried
defense,
taters.
Sling Blade says 7 lines in the whole movie.
Yeah. Forget what that guy's name is. He goes, yeah, God Dale's going to need an ambulance.
First hit, no.
Yeah, he's like, I hit him in the head with a sling blade. I'll be here.
I love it. I love it.
Sorry.
That's where we went. That's how we close the podcast.
That's Sling Blade.
Yeah, love it. Well, church, Benji, have you ever seen Sling Blade? Oh man, I know.
We're watching it tonight, baby.
Sorry, Benji.
So good.
You might love it.
It's so good.
Love it. Well, sweet man, Rizzi, thanks for jumping on. You're the
buddy.
man,
Pleasure.
and all the things that you do. So, including putting up with me and Adam. Brave man, the brave man.
Yeah.
Bravery in it.
Hey, can I say to somebody, if you're struggling with how to strive to excel to build up the church, don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah.
But start by asking Jesus.
Yep.
He was the king of building up the church. He's the one. He is the king. He builds up the church, as you pointed out.
Absolutely.
But and if you're still struggling, then talk to people around you. Talk to a staff member.
Yeah.
Usually they know.
Yeah, and I would encourage, and I might get in trouble for saying this, but I'll just say it. I would encourage the person listening that maybe you don't go to the tabernacle, but you hang out with us online, you listen to our podcast and stuff like that. I'm glad that resource is something that is blessing you, but our intention is not to be your local church if you don't live in a place where you can come be with us. And so we love being a supplement and a resource to that, but please go find a local church to plug into, one that preaches the Bible. I promise this church is not the only one that does it. Find somewhere locally that you can plug in and be a part of getting after it. Keep listening to the podcast, like, subscribe, 5-star rating. But
but strive to excel to build up that church.
Yeah,
Sharing
absolutely.
is a step toward excelling.
Yeah.
But
join
a church, get involved.
Tier
get
1
plugged in.
followers are building up the church.
Exactly.
Tier
Yeah.
1
So, 'cause
followers.
we haven't
I want
talked
to
about
be
this
tier
in a while.
1.
Yeah, tier
I
1.
want to be tier
There's tier
1.
system here.
Yeah, nice.
Benj, you're the man, bro. Thanks. You rock.
Benji didn't have a Ghost or a Mountain Dew today.
Are you good?
He's got to be dying.
Are you good? Are you changing your ways? Do you think you could drink water only for a week?
Would you?
If I tried.
Love it.
If you
Sweet.
tried.
Well, podcast family, until next time, this is one of Martin's name, Rizzi, MJ, John, Benji, and Britton signing off.